let's get started. So I'm going to share what it is that we're talking about here. And I saw these new icons come out the other day.
Yep.
And I got to say at first, like my first reaction was I saw it in my Gmail, like, I kind of like this M. And then they all just kind of started looking the same. And then there's nothing but raw hate in the world for these things right now. And I was curious for you. I mentioned them to you, and you kind of seemed like you had an opinion already too. So I'm curious to you, like, so from a UX point of view, UI point of view, what's good or bad or great or awful about these things?
Well, I mean, as designers, we always have an opinion. We have to have an opinion, whether it's, we're making one up on the spot. I mean, for me, I see the Google Suite as a business suite. And so it is really around efficiency and clarity in design.
Yeah.
And so I think what Google's done wrong here is that they've muddied the waters. They've muddled their designs. They've introduced a lot of additional unrequired cognitive load on their users, because as you mentioned, you saw one and you're like, okay, that looks interesting. Compare it to the calendar icon, the old calendar icon. Okay, I can see that. I see how it's drawn off of the drive icon. And then they started folding them in, and all of a sudden your tab icon and your tab changes, and you got a Gmail and you got a calendar, and you're looking at them and you're glancing at them, and you can't actually tell the difference.
That's a great point.
What they've done is they've removed all the glanceability around them. If one of those icons wants to have the full set of colors, and maybe it's drive as the parent, I mean, it's not really the parent,
right?
And then you actually want to take one of those colors and drive out the other applications. Like the layered concept that they have, is nice. It looks modern, but the fact that they've reused all of their four or five primary colors in every single icon. It's impossible to distinguish at a glance what you're looking at. So if you zoom out to the actual size that these will be, the difference between the calendar and Google a Google Doc is going to be really hard to distinguish. And same with Meet Me or whatever Google's calling it. So
right.
Just really hard it's really hard to scan.
And in fact, I mean, and it's ignominious when you end up on, I think the first time I saw this was on the Crappy Design subreddit.
Yeah.
And one of the jokes that I now see, now I can't unsee, is that they're basically all the same icon, you know? And, I just, from your point of view, I'm looking at the old ones, I have them up here. One of the things that's good about it, and I learned a new phrase today, it was glanceability. But they make sense when you've got a lot of things up and you're looking to find something. I guess that made more sense. The one innovation I did really like that I think they took from Apple was that the calendar icon now shows today's number in it, which I always thought was really helpful, what Apple did that Google didn't. So like today it'll say 28, for example, I thought was great, but you're right, blown up. I dare you to tell, I mean, I guess, now that we're digging really into them, I guess this is flipped from that one somehow, but that's not enough, right?
No, and especially this is zoomed in, right? So we get the ability to look at these at, I don't know, 100 times the size that they're going to be within the tool. There's that app's drop down within, if you're in Gmail, to switch between the apps. Like, there's just a information clarity. Right. I haven't evaluated these for accessibility, but I think it'd be really interesting to look at somebody who has a vision deficiency. Google's really good about that stuff. So I don't want to insinuate, because I haven't done my homework, that I'm not paying attention to it. But if you look at some of the icons and the shape is too similar and the colors are really muddled, it's going to be pretty hard to tell the difference if you have a vision deficiency. So it's something we take into account as designers, but also that helps legibility and scannability, glanceability for every user across the board.
So get in the time machine. So we've been complaining. So get in the time machine and go back to whenever they decided, hey, guys, let's change everything up. What should they have done that they didn't perhaps do?
Well, I think this nice overlay of the colors is, it's a nice twist. And I think what they should have done, and I don't always credit Microsoft for anything from a visual perspective or design perspective, but they kind of have their core colors, and each tool has a primary color. And then what I would have done is kept that color. So if blue's calendar, you just would have used shades of blue in the calendar icon. And then you just would have used a shade of green in the Meet icon. Docs is complicated. It's a triangle color, so maybe that's the multicolor one. So I think it's basically picking a primary color, a hero color for each one of the tools. Red would have been Gmail, and then just updating the aesthetics of the icon or logo, without introducing every color into every logo.
Yeah. So let me just kind of maybe a related off-top question. You mentioned you brought up Microsoft. There was a time, and as a non-designer who I think can just barely appreciate design, I remember there was a time when Google's logo was, I looked at it and like, I could have done that. I could load up Times New Roman and pick some, like it really looked like grade school level. Yeah, and at some point in the last, and you tell me whatever time frame, Google decided, hey, you know what, actually, we're going to be a design company, and like the whole material design thing and the new logo and everything else. And generally speaking, they've done a really great job. And I'm curious for you if you've picked up on any sort of like, what their overall, trend or momentum about this design stuff is.
Well, they've definitely taken it more seriously, and they've approached it from much more of like a platform perspective of trying to drive alignment between their products. But I'd argue that the initial version of material design was pretty bad. What I felt was that introduction, what we call affordances, things that are clickable versus things that are read only. The first version of material design did not draw a heavy distinction. So you still run into apps where I'm looking at it and I'm like, all right, there's a line underneath those words. Does that mean that's an icon? That's a field I can click in? Or is that just something that's underlined? Now they've clarified that over time. And I don't know. I mean, I know some of these companies run large scale tests on like Mechanical Turk. They have thousands of people work through their interface and identify bugs. And I don't know the inside take on that, but I imagine they learned over time that they need to do a better job of clean is one thing, but that material design, you still had to worry about sort of quote unquote affordances, but they're taking it more seriously. But what's interesting, if you go into Gmail, Gmail now, they changed the icons down the left rail as well. They used to be, they used to be solid icons, and now they have single, like a single or two pixel outline.
Yeah.
Like if you just, the difference, that's another glanceability. They've added so much more like contrast and like noise to the screen. I know we're going to get used to them because users tend to, when they have a product, they tend to get used to those changes. But that's just a subtle thing of like, I'm sure somebody thought that looked, and that was a smart decision, and it looked a little bit more modern, but it actually like, it creates much more cognitive load on users to have to scan through and differentiate those icons. So I got a little bit off of the Microsoft.
No, it's great. So, but maybe to button it up here, your point about we all get used to the interfaces, good or bad. Yeah. How will they know if this was a good idea or a bad idea, and when will they know it?
I mean, I imagine they're going to make some subtle tweaks to it over time, just based on user feedback. I do think that they are fairly responsive with some of their tools and have taken that seriously. I don't think they have a monumental failure here. I think that it bothers some people from a design perspective. I think it's a little bit noisy, but it's also a little bit inside baseball to be that focused on icons. I think a lot of the standard users they kind of get used to it and they move on. And so they might make some tweaks along the way and some clarity. They tend to roll these things out progressively, right? Like not all of my tools got updated at once, and not the icons along the left side didn't change on the first time when they changed. So I think they're kind of doing it, and then they're resonating. They have a pretty active user forum. But when you have momentum in a series of tools, I forget what that tool was that Google launched. That was like that collaborative tool, like Google Wave. Is that what it was called?
Maybe.
I don't know. It was like a group collaboration tool that didn't do well, right?
Wait a second. Google made a tool and then got rid of it?
The Google Graveyard.
They did that?
Google Graveyard. Yeah. It's one of those tools that made it, right? So when Slack, for example, makes changes, people up in arms. My team's up in arms when they make a change. But over time, because the tool has sort of momentum in it, you kind of get used to it. And then I think a lot of times with Slack, you say, well, that's actually a pretty smart decision that I might not have made myself. I don't know if I'm going to give Google as much of that credit, but when you have momentum in tools, it allows you to make some mistakes along the way and not kind of drive users nuts. And I don't think that they fundamentally changed how the inbox works, right? Or how the calendar works. And those improvements, I'll say, calendar in particular, I feel like they've made a lot of good UI improvements over the years.
Absolutely.
That make it a much more functional and efficient tool to use. So
cool. Well, thanks for bitching about the new icons with me.
Yeah,
It's fun.
I can complain all day long, Mike.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to say that was our podcast.
Hey there. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to hear more content just like that.